The Regulation G rule set has been announced, and everyone was kind of speculating what it would be, whether it would be Koraidon, Miraidon meta, single restricted, double restricted. Everyone was kind of questioning what it would end up. Regulation G ended up being single restricted meta, and it's going to run from May 1st, 2024, all the way until August 31st, I believe, and which makes this the World Championship qualifiers meta. So this is the first time we're ever going to have a meta game where it's a single restricted in Worlds, which will make for a very interesting World Championships. Yeah, so right here it runs to August 31st, 2024. All permitted Pokemon in the Regulation G set are available. So this means the Paldea Pokédex, the Kitakami Pokédex, the Blueberry Pokédex, and any Pokemon available through Pokemon Home. So we've been used to this in Regulation F. However, the restricteds have been added to this. This includes Pokemon like Mewtwo, Lugia, Ho-Oh, Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, etc., all the way down the list. And generally, we need to go over what restricted legendary Pokemon are. So like these are called like box legends because it's what the Pokemon that would be on the box that sells, etc. But these Pokemon are actually still banned, like Mew, Deoxys, Volcanion, etc. All of these are mythical Pokemon and will not be available for competition in Regulation G. So I'm going to move over here to the tier list, and I'm going to explain to you guys what Pokemon are going to be good and what Pokemon are going to be bad. I'm going to go ahead and put a disclaimer out right now that even though some of these Pokemon may be in the not viable or the Pegasus from Yu-Gi-Oh, which I will explain in a minute, these Pokemon are obviously not comparable to normal Pokemon. So if I put a Pokemon in a low tier and you want to say, well, it's better than X, Y, or Z that's in a low tier normal Pokemon, just keep in mind that I'm comparing these Pokemon within themselves. This is a single restricted format, so you are pretty much building around these Pokemon. If you want to kind of do well at tournaments or in-life regionals or stuff like that, then I'm going to give you the best Pokemon for the best chance to do well at these events, and then the worst Pokemon that aren't going to do good. Just because I put a Pokemon in a low tier, it doesn't mean that this Pokemon is actually garbage as far as statistically. These are restricted Pokemon after all. They will have better stats than any other Pokemon in the game. So I want to just kind of keep that in mind that we are comparing the Pokemon to each other and what I would use in my single restricted slot in order to have the most success. And I'm going to start out by explaining my tier list. So up first, we have the S tier, which is obviously the top. It's in brightest green. I say this is go. This gives you the best chance. And I'm going to put this as the Shadow Rider tier. A little bit of foreshadowing, but yes, that Pokemon is insane. Then we have the A tier. The best way I can explain the A tier for you is like this Pokemon will consistently top 8. It may get a few regional wins or even like an IC win, but that's like it's not going to be as consistent as like these S tier Pokemon. Like I feel like these S tier Pokemon in comparison could be something like a Tornadus or an Urshifu, right? Where you're just going to see that in every single top 8. No matter what, you'll see multiples, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Stuff like Incineroar, these Pokemon are just going to be in the format. And I basically put the A tier Pokemon as Pokemon that you will see in top 8, but I don't think they will be as consistent. I mean, you'll see maybe 1 or 2 consistently, but other than that, no. The B tier is a Pokemon I could best explain is like a little bit worse than A tier. You might see 1 in top 8. Usually these will like top 16, top 32. You'll definitely day 2 with these Pokemon. I think these Pokemon have like a great chance to make a day 2 run, but these Pokemon aren't as consistent as the S or the A tier Pokemon. And so you're kind of playing from behind a little bit, but however, these Pokemon are still strong, and I think these Pokemon have a good chance to day 2. Then we have the C tier. I think the C tier Pokemon are like Pokemon that the best way I can explain it is like you have a chance to win, but you're just, if you notice a trend, we're losing consistency all the way down. So you lose that extra consistency that these B tier, A tier, and S tier Pokemon have, as well as the C tier Pokemon are Pokemon I think that you can't like ignore, right? These Pokemon still may make day 2, but they're not likely to. Under the right hands of a good player, these Pokemon can like do work. And I think that if you basically have a good game plan with these Pokemon and you practice a lot, then you can make these Pokemon work. I don't think we'll consistently see these Pokemon in the top 16. However, I think 1 or 2 maybe can sneak into like that top 32 slot with the correct player, obviously, and the correct trainer. Then we have the Pegasus from Yu-Gi-Oh! /D tier. So if you guys didn't watch Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pegasus used a Millennium Eye, and he could see all the opposing players' turns. He could see like their hand. So he basically knew like what they were going to do before they kind of did it. And that's exactly how I would explain these Pokemon. You're going to have some kind of cheats or some kind of like future vision to understand what these Pokemon, like what your opponent's going to do. You're basically going to have to make God reads every single turn. You're going to soul read your opponent. And even then you may just be like crapped out of luck. So these Pokemon are Pokemon that I just would not ever recommend using. I don't think these Pokemon are going to be good. I don't even think we'll see like one in the top 32, top 64, like, if you're lucky. But these Pokemon are essentially just a waste of time, in my opinion, to even build around. We have the Digimon tier, which, I mean, I'll just go ahead and tell you now. I don't like this Pokemon. I think it's not a Pokemon, it's a Digimon, and I don't like the way it plays. I'll put it in the tier here in a minute, but this is the Digimon tier, and you should know what Pokemon this is. And then we have Pokemon that's not viable. So I'm going to start out with the not viable tier. Like, these are obviously not viable. These are pre-evolutions. They're just not going to work. I think that this Pokemon is not viable. I mean, it's OU. I mean, this Pokemon is Bax Caliber. Honestly, I just don't think it's viable. I mean, you would just use these two over that like all day. I don't think this Pokemon is very viable statistically. I think Zacian and Zamazenta, the base forms aren't viable. I mean, you lose so much attack and so much defense. You lose the Rusted Sword or the Shield, and you just don't get that +1. And that's what makes these Pokemon so broken. So I just don't think that this is kind of viable ever to build around. I mean, you could creep these up here, like with Clear Amulet maybe or something like that. And you could run like leftovers, I guess, into these Pokemon. But I just think that they're just outclassed and not viable. Like, there's no reason why, if you're going to pick to build around Zacian or Zamazenta, that you wouldn't just use the better forms. Calyrex is obviously just not viable. I think this Pokemon is, it's just statistically not viable. And I think that should be it for the list. Up next, we have the Digimon tier, and then I'm going to go from the generation that they came from. The Digimon tier is Eternatus. This is not a Pokemon. This is not a fucking Pokemon. This is not a Pokemon. This is a Digimon. Look at it. Don't use it. I don't respect it. There's one set that's going around, and I beat it consistently, but don't use it. It's not fun to play against, and it's a Digimon. It just doesn't fit in. I don't care if somebody makes it up here. This is Digimon tier. This stays Digimon tier, and this Pokemon is essentially it's just not fun to play against. So I'm not even going to tell you what it does because I just don't want to spread information on how to use it. I have seen pretty creative sets with it and partner Pokemon, and it makes life misery. So we just put this into Digimon tier. It doesn't exist, right? This just doesn't exist. All right, up next, we're going to start in Kanto. Now, Kanto only has one box legend, and that is Mewtwo. Mewtwo is one of the most iconic Pokemon pretty much of all time when it comes to, like, thinking about Pokemon. You have Pikachu, you have Charizard, you have Mewtwo. Things that, stands out. They're obviously overused or, outplayed or whatever you want to call it, overplayed. But these Pokemon, they've been power crept. I'm going to be honest with you. So we're going to start out with Pegasus from D tier. Mewtwo is statistically, it's bulkier than the normal psychic types, but the problem it has is like, it's 130 speed, so it's just getting outsped by like Flutter, Miraidon, stuff like that, Chien-Pao. It's psychic type, and I'm going to be honest, like, a lot of these early on psychic types will have the same issue where there are just better psychic types to pick from. When you're wanting to use your restricted slot. This is also a single restricted format. So like if you're building around a Pokemon, there are other psychic type like Pokemon that get expanding force, and that's basically all this is going to do. I think this will be like good YouTube content, and I plan to make a team building guide for all these Pokemon just to kind of showcase how to use them, and in case you wanted to build around them. I think that this could be a good ladder team for like the in-game ladder, but you will have to know everything that's going on with this Pokemon. You're going to have to make some hard soul reads with Mewtwo, and I just think that you can get so much more value on another restricted. Up next, we're going to Johto, where we have two restricteds in Lugia and Ho-Oh. Now, it hurts my soul. It absolutely just kills my soul. But Lugia is one of my favorite Pokemon. No, it's my favorite Pokemon, actually, of all time. Lugia just doesn't cut it, honestly. Honestly, I think I'm gonna put Lugia in the C tier. The reason being is that it does have multi-scale, which when it's at full HP, it takes half damage. So there are like cool things you can do with this Pokemon. It is psychic flying, and it gets the Aeroblast move with 100 base power on the special side, 95 accuracy, and it has a high crit rate. So like this game is lacking flying type coverage like tremendously. That's why people were using Terra Flying Landorus back in the day, or it just extremely it just lacks flying coverage, and flying type is so good it neutrally hits most things in the game. So I do think like there is a niche for it. I think a good player can make Lugia work, but the issue is like this Pokemon for your restricted slot just doesn't feel good. You have 90 attack and 90 special attack, so it's not really hitting hard for a restricted. you do respectively have 154 defense and 130 defense, 106 HP. So like this thing is super bulky, especially when the multi-scale combination. You could run cool weakness policy sets to proc policy, but I'll be honest with you guys, weakness policy just hasn't been as good in this game, Scarlet and Violet. It was a lot better in Sword and Shield when you can kind of make up for the bulk in those Dynamax Pokemon, and then you can take advantage of like Max Steel Spike and Max Quake, where you can do some really high damage on the power of the move kind of increase, and you can increase your defenses as well. Also, Max Airstream was really good on this Pokemon, and like you could boost its attack and then boost its speed with the policy plus Airstream boost. These are gone in this game. I just think Lugia suffers from this. I do think like a really good player could possibly make it work, like, but again, this is in the C tier. I just don't expect this Pokemon to even top 64, too often. It's another good ladder Pokemon. It's just a little bit better than Mewtwo. Moving on to Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is definitely an interesting one. Ho-Oh gets Regenerator, which is kind of neat. With the fire typing, you could work it with an Amoonguss and like kind of keep your Pokemon healed. You could trade some damage. It does get Sacred Fire, which I think is really, really cool. And it gets like Brave Bird, which is obviously, again, we talked about earlier how there is like a lack of flying coverage in the game. Sacred Fire has that 50% chance to burn. So that's pretty good. But if we're talking about a restricted slot here, I mean, Entei kind of does the same thing. And I'll be honest, it does it a little better. It's not 4 times weak to rock like Ho-Oh. Yes, we do gain some fighting coverage. We'll likely have to run this thing Clear Amulet because of all the Intimidate. And I just think that, again, you have to wrap your mind around this is a restricted slot. Like if this Pokemon was unlimited, right? And we could use like this in a combination of other Pokemon, sure. And I think we will see Ho-Oh get better as the double restricted format comes out, because then this Pokemon does get kind of scary because like it's hard to clear it with Generator. Like I said, those Sacred Fires like hard to swap into. Like a lot of those physical types just don't want to take the Sacred Fire. And you could put it in a combination with things like Groudon plus Ho-Oh is interesting. Boost those Sacred Fires in the sun. This has ground typing. This has flying typing. So like you could, work these two together pretty well, I think. And that's like just an example of a Pokemon that I think will grow as the format grows to double restricted. But right now, I'm going to put it in the C tier. I'm going to put it ahead of Lugia, though. I think it is better than Lugia. It's more offensive than Lugia. Again, I just don't expect to see this even at the top 64, but maybe one in this tier, like maybe a one of. But it's just, I don't know. It's just not that great. I mean, you might as well run Entei, gain the inner focus, lose the, fake out pressure, lose the Clear Amulet, and actually run like AV or something for those Calyrex matchups, and you can run like Terranormal Snarl, and you'll just get more value out of the same Pokemon essentially, with like, not burning your restricted slot. All right, up next, we're going to Hoenn, where we have Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza. Now, Kyogre is an interesting one, right? Everyone wrote this Pokemon off early on, like super early on. I'm part of everyone. I thought this Pokemon was going to be really, really bad. I thought like, you have what? Raging Bolts here with the, it's insane bulk and like just able to resist Kyogre. Rillaboom is present in the meta. It's just very good check to Kyogre. We have Miraidon, which is introduced to the game, and Koraidon. So this is important because this is a Sunsetter that's not weak to water, just like Groudon is. And Miraidon is an electric dragon, so it's just resisting everything that Kyogre wants to do. And we also have the Ogerpon Wellspring, which just eats the water absorb. That being said, I think this Pokemon is... I don't know if it's A tier or B tier. I think it's an A tier Pokemon, but I think we're going to have it lower in A tier. And I know this could be a little shocking, but honestly, early tournament results, Kyogre's been doing great. You could Terra off your weakness with Terra Grass to like Rillaboom and Ogerpon and kind of wall those Pokemon out. I also think that the Wellspring usage is kind of going down because Calyrex just kind of rocks it, even though it seems like it would be a good counter. And with the use of Calyrex Shadow, it's just not going to do as well. It's still a great, phenomenal Pokemon. Also, some of these great Sunsetters make the Ogerpon Wellspring's job a lot harder. I do think this is an A tier Pokemon. You get the 150 special attack Water Spouts. This is like Torkoal maximized like 1,000,000,000% better. You still get tons of bulk, 100 HP, 140 Spadef. So things like Fluttermane and even the Calyrex are going to have a hard time busting through Kyogre. And then Kyogre's partners are very good. Like you obviously have the Tornadus Kyogre combination, which is very deadly. If you want to tear grass off the weakness to Kyogre, not only can it kill some of the grass type Pokemon with Water Spout, like Rillaboom, for example, if you helping hand Kyogre Water Spout, you can KO a clear or a Miracle Seed Rillaboom, which is absolutely insane to me. And then there's a lot of Kyogre teams that are partnering the Kyogre with Tornadus and Farigiraf. So that play is actually like a viable play in the meta. It's not just something I'm making up. Like you could just put Farigiraf, they can't Grassy Glide, they can't Fake Out. You basically just click Water Spout, not even with Terra Water, by the way. You just click Water Spout and Helping Hand, and you're just basically clearing boards, and then your back can just clean up. So that's a pretty neat combo that you can do. And then also, obviously, the Tornadus Ogre combo. I think that this Pokemon is going to be very good. I do think it's going to suffer a lot with Origin Pulse being able to miss, but Water Spout kind of makes up for that. So, like, its consistency is still pretty good, in my opinion. All right, next we have Groudon. Groudon's an interesting Pokemon. This Pokemon's really good. It checks Miraidon very well. Sets the Sun. I still think this Pokemon's going to be insane. Honestly, I think it's an A-tier Pokemon. I do think we'll see a lot in like the top 16, top 32 area. Maybe one sneak into top 8. I think it's worse than Kyogre. I know that this may be a hot take, but I just think it's worse than Kyogre. Miraidon is not as good, and we'll explain why earlier than everyone had it like early on in the S tier. I don't think Miraidon is nearly as good, and that's what it's coming to check. Also, we all know Precipice Blades is its signature move, and it's a love-hate relationship. 120 base stab ground move spread is amazing, but it has that 85 accuracy, which is actually better than Tornadus, but you feel like you miss this move more. This move is more impactful, in my opinion, but it feels like you miss it more because there are immunities such as the flying type, as well as like it just feels bad that you're restricted as missing moves, in my opinion. To make matters worse, like, you know, Tornadus can set rain and the Bleak Winds are 100% accurate. And now Tornadus doesn't even have to set the rain with Kyogre. So like the Bleak Winds feel like they hit more because you can set board states where they are going to hit 100% of the time. And Groudon just can't do this. And I think this is actually going to hurt the consistency of this Pokemon. So I'm actually going to put it below Kyogre because it doesn't have that eruption or, well, it's physical mon, but it doesn't have the basically the secondary move like Kyogre does in the Origin Pulse or Water Spout, excuse me, that can like make up for the fact that it can miss. And I think that's going to hurt this Pokemon's consistency a lot. And actually, I think I want to put it in B tier, honestly. I know that sounds crazy. We'll put it at the bottom A tier. No, this is the bottom A tier Pokemon. Next up, we have Rayquaza. Rayquaza is one that I was like, oh, get ready for Regulation G. Rayquaza plus Chien-Pao is just going to be insane. But the more I think about it, honestly, this Pokemon feels like it's not as good. I think this Pokemon's going to be good. I want to put it in the bottom of B tier or low C. I think it's better than Lugia-Ho, so I'm going to put it at B, but at the bottom of it once the list kind of gets going. So Rayquaza has a lot going for it, don't get me wrong. Airlock is an insane ability. Like, when it's active, basically the effective weather conditions are disabled. So obviously that checks Kyogre, that checks Groudon, that checks Koraidon. So that's very, very, very strong, right? However, this Pokemon, it suffers from Incineroar syndrome, right? Like, you have to run Clear Amulet on this thing, or else you're just going to get intimidated to death. It does have 150 base attack and 150 special attack. You could run it, like, mixed, or you could even run a special Rayquaza. But I think it's best, honest to God, like, bread and butter combination is going to be beside that Chien-Pao, and to get the defense drops. And I think you just have to run it Clear Amulet, like Terra Normal, E-Speed, just like Dragonite, and then you run the Dragon's Ascent, which is his signature move. Dragon's Ascent is, again, it's flying coverage, as we spoke about earlier, 120 base, 100 accuracy, so it's very, very consistent, but it does lower your defense and special defense by 1, so, like, you need to trade damage kind of quick. And then Rayquaza is also, I'm not going to say it's slow, but it's 95 speed. It's slow for, like, some of the Pokemon that we have available to us now. I do think, like, this Pokemon, like, can make some waves besides Chien-Pao and, like, Farigiraf, right? Like, there's a Worlds team from 2023. I think Michael ran it, and he got second place. It was Chien-Pao, Urshifu, Dragapult, all that stuff with Farigiraf support, Rilla, and then Heatran. I think this Pokemon could fit well on a team like that. If you do run this Pokemon, like Clear Amulet, and you have the Farigiraf support, you can't fake it out, and then you can't intimidate with Clear Amulet. And then I think with Swords Dance, this thing can actually snowball. That's why I'm putting it in lower B tier. I do see potential with this Pokemon. I just don't think you want to lock your one restricted for it, right? Like, you could just run Dragonite here, be it naturally immune to Fake Out and Intimidate with Inner Focus, and then run the Choice Band and get the 50% damage boost. So I just think, like, honestly, that's just probably your more consistent play. But yeah, like, you know, I still see the potential in this Pokemon, honestly. All right, up next, we are moving on to Sinnoh. And Sinnoh has some interesting new Pokemon. And, well, technically, these aren't Sinnoh, but I'm going to put these in the Sinnoh region because it's Dialga and Palkia. And then we have the Giratina. All right, so we're going to start off with, I guess, Dialga. Honestly, Dialga's okay. I think it's just not that great in a single restricted format. Like, it's wanting to set Trick Room, and I mean, Dragon Steel typing is very, very neat. It has like Telepathy and Pressure, which are just, they're not very good abilities. And I'm actually gonna put it above Lugia. I think no, it's worse than Lugia. I mean, it's got 150 special attack. You could do some neat stuff with this Pokemon, but I just think it's outclassed by a ton of the Pokemon that you can just use in its place. Honestly, there's not really much to say about this Pokemon. I just think, like, again, it's just outclassed. I mean, it's a Trick Room setter, and when we have, you know, Shadow Rider available, and I mean Ice Rider available, and even Palkia, that there's just outclassed, and even, you know, Nala. So I'm just gonna put this low C, and I'm trying to think, is it? I don't know if it's. I think it's worse than Lugia. I'm gonna stick by that. And then we have Palkia. I think Palkia is definitely better than all of these for sure. Palkia is a really good Pokemon. Palkia is going to be another Pokemon that I will gladly move up the list, like, once Double Restricted comes out. This Pokemon suffers right now because it can't be paired with the Galar Ice Rider, which was a very good combination in Sword and Shield. So I think that this Pokemon will climb up the ranks once we kind of get into a Double Restricted format. This Pokemon's honestly very, very good. Water Dragon typing is nice. It's very defensive. It has 150 special attack, so it's very good to safely set Trick Room. 100 defense, 120 SPDF, and then 90 HP. It's fast. I mean, it is 100 base speed, but it's very neat because, like, when you lead like Palkia and a support mon like Amoonguss, or even Palkia Shadow Rider, you don't know which Pokemon's going to click Trick Room. You don't know if Palkia's just going to chip you down, and you set Trick Room, and then you get Glacial Lance the following turn. It just makes two really, really bulky Pokemon that hit very hard, and they're hard to clear. And it's also this, special attack is very good. So, like, if your Glastrier's, your Calyrex Ice is not doing so well, you can just bring in the Palkia and set Trick Room instead, and then sweep teams that way. But this Pokemon will gain more usage, I think, as the meta goes on. As far as Dialga origin and Palkia origin, I'm honestly not sure where to put these Pokemon. Statistically, they've changed slightly. I think they lose attack and they gain SPDF. One gains SPDF and one gains speed. I think Dialga loses attack and it gains SPDF. The Palkia origin loses attack and gains speed. I mean, we don't have testing with this Pokemon. I'm just gonna honestly put them like below their respective one. I think they do about the same thing. They're basically just a beat stick that sets Trick Room. They just do damage, and I don't really have the information. I mean, I know they're not in the not viable tier, right? But like, this is the first time we've seen these Pokemon, and the first time we've seen like a single restricted format be the official format. For Worlds at least. So I just don't think these will be the picks, and I'm just gonna kind of group them with their respective Pokemon. Up next, we have Giratina, and honestly, this Pokemon is hot garbage. It is the Pegasus from Yu-Gi-Oh tier. You will need to Soul Read your opponent to make anything happen with these Pokemon. It's just slow. It's a ghost type. It's weak to Shadow Rider already off the bat, which a lot of these, psychic and ghost types are. It's 150 base HP, but like the base form of Giratina is 100 attack, 100 special attack. Again, same with Lugia. It's just not really hitting very hard. And it's just, there's not really cool things you can do with this Pokemon. I mean, it's just slow. Pressure, Telepathy, again, not very good abilities. And then it's just not a good Pokemon, honestly. I hate to really put that there. But yeah, these are just garbage. I would not use these if I were wanting to do well at regionals, honestly. Next, we're going to move on to Unova. Now, the Unova region has some neat Pokemon in it. We've got the Reshiram and the Zekrom. And then we have the Kyurem and stuff. And we already saw, this Pokemon is just Max Caliper glorified from this region. So we'll start off with Reshiram. It has Turbo Blaze, so it ignores abilities of other Pokemon. That's a neat ability, honestly, especially on a Dragon Fire type. So you can ignore Flash Fire, and you could just do massive damage with Blue Flare. Blue Flare is 130 base power, 85 accuracy. So this is another one of these restricteds that it's very, very good, but it feels bad to miss on its signature move and stuff. And, you have the Draco Meteor access, 150 base special attack. Draco Meteor's just scary. 100 HP, 120 speed F, 100 defense. Bulky, kind of fast, not really fast, actually. It's 90 speed. So it's like power crept by some of the newer fast Pokemon. As far as tiering, I just don't think Reshiram is very, very good. I think it's better than Lugia for sure. And I think it's better than Ho-Oh because you can't intimidate it. I'll be honest. I think it is better than Ho-Oh. I don't know though with the regenerator. Turbo Blaze is actually pretty interesting. There's some cool stuff that you can do with this Pokemon, but I don't see this Pokemon being a Pokemon that you're going to use actually in single restricted. It may get a little better in double restricted, but I don't see it climbing up too much. I see Palkia definitely climbing up very high, and I see Ho-Oh actually climbing up pretty high, but I just don't think this Pokemon is better. I'm actually going to drop it below Ho-Oh. I think there's more viability out of Ho-Oh just because Sacred Fire is just such a good move. It can't miss. Yeah, and it can burn things, so it's hard to swap in on Sacred Fire. So I'm actually going to put it below Ho-Oh. Next we have Zekrom. Zekrom is Dragon Electric, which basically outclassed by Miraidon. I just don't think that Zekrom's going to be very, very good. Honestly, I don't think Zekrom's going to be all that great. Physical, it has to use the Clear Amulet, which is a nice little buff. I mean, I don't want to put these Pokemon kind of beside each other. Because that just doesn't. Where to put this? I think this goes better than Dialga for sure. Better than Lugia. Lugia is pretty bad. I guess they are just side by side here because Ho is definitely better than this. And I think Ho is actually better than this origin form. I think if you're going to use one, you're probably just use the OG Palkia because it's a little bit slower for Trick Room. So I'm actually going to move this down quite a bit actually. But yeah, Zekrom, I mean, it has Terravolt. Their moves, again, it ignores abilities, but you're kind of getting more value out of ignoring Flash Fire than really ignoring any of this because this still has a ground immunity. Yeah, I'm gonna put these at the bottom actually. It's just a decent Pokemon. Bolt Strike, again, same thing as Fusion Flare. It's like the 130 base, 85 chance to miss. This is physical though with 150 special attack. Your item is locked into Clear Amulet, so I'm actually gonna. No, I like it right here. But yeah, you're locked into Clear Amulet with this Pokemon essentially, unless you want to just get intimidated. Can't use Draco Meteor, which does suck. Because you're physical, so you have to rely on Dragon Claw, or I guess if it gets Outrage. So it's just not the best Pokemon, and it's just outclassed in every way by Miraidon. Actually, I'm gonna drop it down here. I think that you're just outclassed by Miraidon so much, and yeah, it's just not usable, honestly. I think it's the best one in here though, but yeah. Then we have the Kyurem forms. Let's see, we have Kyurem Black and Kyurem White. So Kyurem Black, it's okay. I mean, again, you have Terravolt, you have the 170 base attack, which is ridiculous attack stat. But you have to run the Clear Amulet once again on this Pokemon, and it just feels bad to have to run Clear Amulet. But your Dragon Ice, I mean, you could run other things, but I think Clear Amulet is just the most optimal. You are Dragon Ice, so I mean, you do get physical Dragon moves like Dragon Claw. I don't know if it gets Outrage or not, but your physical Ice moves are Icicle Spear. So you could do a loaded dice set, I guess, with this thing if it gets Scale Shot, and that would be kind of interesting. But again, it's just not your best pick, honestly. I just don't think this Pokemon's very good. I would put it above the Kyurem Black and above these for sure. Above Lugia and above Resh. I think it's below Resh. Yeah, I think this Pokemon is just a C tier. It's just not that great. And we're moving on to Kyurem White. Kyurem White's an interesting Pokemon, right? We've actually seen this Pokemon on some teams already, on these Ninetales teams. I mean, 170 special attack is crazy. 125 HP and then the 90 defense with 100 SPDF is pretty good. It gets Turbo Blaze, so this is Dragon Ice, but it does ignore the abilities of other Pokemon. And then you obviously, its bread and butter is just going to be spamming Blizzard. So you could spam Blizzard. It gets cool moves like Freeze Dry for those water types that might try to wall it out. and then it gets access to Draco Meteor. I think this Pokemon is like, it's B tier, but like bottom of B tier, honestly, potential. Like, I think this Pokemon is worse than Rayquaza, but like, you can make a team around this. You can make this work. And I think this Pokemon will see some usage on those Ninetales teams. You can set screens, get it under Trick Room or something. You can spam those Blizzards. It's got a 95 base speed, so like for some of these Pokemon, you're just kind of outspeed and essentially just spam Blizzard. And 170 specs Blizzard, that does a lot even to resist. So I could definitely see this Pokemon being like, pretty solid, but it's not going to be something that will consistently top 16 like these Pokemon. I think this is like one you can see sneaking into top 32. Same with Rayquaza, or even top 64. But I don't see these being, again, like these are going to be your top 8 consistent. These are going to be one can sneak into top 8 and possibly and go down to like top 16 very consistently. So yeah, I could see this definitely get some use though. Moving on, we are skipping Kalos and we're actually going to Alola. They don't have the Kalos Legends in here, which makes me wonder if it's going to be in the new Legends game and they're going to bring the Tapus back through the Legends game, or if they're just going to snuff them all together from the game. So we're missing Zern, Yveltal, which is, boohoo. Zern would be kind of frustrating to deal with, I think, with the chance to Terra and then boost up. But, I don't know. Like, I guess it's kind of good that they're not in the game, but we'll see. They may add them because we have enough time in the time frame for them to add them. So we'll see how that plays out. We're starting off with Solgaleo. Solgaleo to me just isn't that good. It had niches in Sword and Shield. Like, yeah, you got the clear body ability or the full metal body, which does prevent a Pokemon from lower stat stages. I mean, its 137 attack is pretty good. You could probably kill Flutter with it, Steel Psychic, but it was really good beside Calyrex. I think this one kind of increases in double restricted, much like some of these other Pokemon. But I don't think this Pokemon is the best. A lot of its bread and butter was clicking Bulldoze with Calyrex, while Calyrex had like Snarl and Wisp, but it could still spread Astral Barrage for like late game cleanup. But then you could use that Steel Spike, and it had Earthquake, so you could like Steel Spike, or you could max Quake, and you could boost its defenses while also boosting its special attack and attack with the weakness policy, and the Bulldoze would not lower its speed. So you're basically getting speed control, you're getting attack boost, and you're boosting up your team's defenses. Then you can switch your Calyrex out for like another Pokemon, start sweeping with this Pokemon, and then clean up the end game of Calyrex. The problem is this is single restricted, so that combo, like, yeah, exists with Spectre, but it's just not as good. Another part of the combo that was really good is you couldn't fake out this Pokemon because you couldn't fake out a Dynamax Pokemon, and then you couldn't fake out the Calyrex because it's a Ghost type. Now with Instant Rillaboom everywhere, you could just fake this out, and the combo kind of stops on turn 1, which just kind of kills the consistency of the combo. I think that this Pokemon is honestly C tier, but I think it's the king of C tier. I think it's worse than is it worse than Palkia? No, Palkia is just better. You can still make things happen with Palkia. I think this just needs too much support, honestly, and I just don't I think like this could in the right hands, this Pokemon can do work, but you have to have this in the right hands, honestly. And I just don't think that this is going to get much usage. Just like I don't think any of these Pokemon will get too much usage, but again, you'll probably see one or two sneak into top 64, maybe one day 2 of a regional or something like that. Lunala is a very, very interesting Pokemon. It gets Shadow Shield, so it's very hard to break. In practice, I've actually been pretty hard pressed with Lunala at times with certain setups. Instant plus Lunala into Amoonguss and then pollen puffing their Lunala back through the Shadow Shield is pretty cool. This Pokemon has 137 special attack and 137 HP, so it's pretty bulky, especially with the Shadow Shield. It does have the Psychic Ghost typing, so it's 4 times weak to knockoff off Incineroar, which will be an important move this meta game, including the horse. But it also gets Meteor Beam, so it could just like one shot Incin or force the Terra. Then it goes +1 special attack, and it also makes like a pretty hard read for turn 1, because then do you fake out and they go like Trick Room, or do they just delete your Incineroar? So essentially, this Pokemon is just a hard turn 1 read. You don't know which way it's going to go. I do think this is a good Pokemon. I do think it's honestly C tier. I think it's better than Blizzard spam. I think it's better than Rayquaza. I think the consistency of this Pokemon is a little bit better than the consistency of this. Because again, Rayquaza is like a one trick. You just click E speed, click Dragon's Ascent, and you put it beside a Chien-Pao for Graf on that team. This can set up Trick Room, and Trick Room kind of gets a little scary, and you could just kind of start sweeping through. I don't know. Yeah, no, I think this is right. I think that it's a good Pokemon, and it has a chance to do well. Next up, we have Necrozma Duskmane. Prism Armor is pretty cool. It receives, 3 force damage for super effective attacks. It does have that steel psychic typing. It's resisting a ton. And it's not exactly taking a full super effective attack. So that's pretty neat to work around. But you do lose the full, clear metal or the full body from the Solgaleo. So you need to run Clear Amulet on it. I think this Pokemon is slightly going to be worse than Solgaleo just because it doesn't get access to that. You'll have to run the Clear Amulet on this Pokemon. And in that case, you can essentially just, use this Pokemon and save an item slot. I do think it's going to be a bit worse than that. I think it's going to be a bit worse than Ho-Oh, Reshiram. Yeah, I could put it right here. I think that's fine. Next up, we have the Necrozma Dawnwings. This Pokemon I've seen a lot too. You get Expanding Force, Meteor Beam, kind of the same as the Lunala, but you get Prism Armor instead of the Shadow Shield. So it just always gets 3 force attack drop versus the Shadow Shield, which gets just a one-time usage, and then you have to heal it up. So this Pokemon could actually, I think this Pokemon is just better than Lunala, honestly, at what it does. I think we can actually drop Lunala off a lot. The more I think about it, because you would just probably want to use the Prism Armor instead to get the 3 force drop. Because then with Utera, that just makes it even better. So I'm actually going to drop Lunala probably. I think it's like the top of C tier, but I think Dawnwings would just be better. I forgot about Dawnwings, so this makes sense to me. Because like I said, you're just probably going to do a better job with this Pokemon. I mean, Shadow Shield is nice if it's full HP, but just receiving 3 force damage for super effective attacks, and then being able to Terra off into something defensive, like if you were like Terra Fairy, you resist a Dark type hit, and then you're weak to Steel and you're weak to Poison, but it's only three quarters. So building this up and then supporting it under Trick Room could be nice, and it's very specially defensive. So and has pretty decent HP stats. So I think this Pokemon is just a better option for the two of these. Moving on, we're going to the Galar region. And we got some nerfs to talk about in this region. Zacian got nerfed. They neutered my boy. They took away the 20 base power of the attack stat. Also, the Intrepid Sword, when it activates, is just a one-time deal now, right? You don't receive this bonus twice. Kind of like a Ogre Pond works, where if you swap it out, swap it back in, then the boost comes back. This Pokemon lost that ability to do that, which is pretty huge for the Pokemon. I do think that this Pokemon is good. I think it's the top of B tier. I could see this Pokemon doing work still. Zacian's main job back in the day was actually just in-game cleanup. You could lead it out sometimes, but you very rarely did, especially with Incineroar and stuff, unless you saw a Dynamax threat and you wanted to pressure it with Behemoth Blade. Also, another nerf is its signature move, Behemoth Blade, just lost that access to just do so much massive damage to a Dynamax Pokemon, because obviously Dynamax doesn't exist. I still think this Pokemon can be very, very good in late game cleanup. You can set up a substitute to dodge those Intimidates, and you can put it beside Howl Gouging Fire, which could be interesting to see on a team like that. I think King Gambit does a good job with the Howl Gouging Fire stuff, because it kind of punishes Intimidate, but being able to boost this thing back up, starting out at +1, so you can Howl, get it back to +1 after Intimidate. It has access to Sacred Sword, so you can hit Incineroar super effective. And then the Fairy Steel type is one of the best typings in the game of all time. So very defensive typing. You can pair this on a Rain team. I've been cooked by it on Rain teams with Amoonguss support. And so you couldn't Parting Shot it. You could Intimidate, but then the Parting Shot came through. And even at neutral, Zacian does a ton of damage still. So I wouldn't sleep on this Pokemon. I do think we could see some of these creep in with a right trainer into that top 32, top 16 region, with the right trainer for sure. But I think that this Pokemon is consistent enough to use, but not the Pokemon of the format like it once was. This Pokemon will climb the list a little bit. I don't know if it will get into the A tier, but I think this Pokemon will be better in double restricted. Up next, we have Zamazenta, who I think personally received a huge buff this format. Zamazenta is basically everything that we wanted it to be, but just better. Zom comes out, it gets that defense boost. It's dodging intimidates because of Iron Defense, Body Press. And then it can actually Oko a Flutterbane at -1 with Heavy Slam, so that's interesting. It gets Wide Guard, but I mean, honestly, with Iron Defense Body Press, probably Behemoth Bash or the Heavy Slam, you probably don't want to run Wide Guard, but it is an option, and it's a very annoying option because things like Calyrex Shadow could be interesting to deal with as this thing's just boosting on the physical side. This Pokemon is scary. I faced a couple in tours recently, and it's paired beside Coaching Mienshao versus me, and it was +4 on turn 1, which was very, very, very hard to deal with. I do think that this is an A tier Pokemon. I think that it's definitely not better than the Weather Setters. I don't think this is, something that's like meta breaking. I mean, you're taking your one restricted slot and you're basically saying I'm an Iron Defense Body Press Pokemon. Things like Komo and stuff of that nature can do this job as well. So you can actually just build around other restricteds. Something like, for example, if you wanted to do like the P2 balance stuff and then you put something like an Ice Rider with Komo or, something in this slot instead. But I do think this Pokemon is scary and needs respect. A tier for sure. I can see this Pokemon sneaking into the top 16 with a good trainer. Maybe once in a while, you can see it kind of do well. But I don't think this is going to be, meta defining or something. A huge plus for this is this Pokemon here. So this being like an anti-meta pick, I think it deserves low end of A tier, touching towards the B tier, honestly. Up next, we have Calyrex Ice Rider. This Pokemon is A tier. I don't think it's S tier, but it is the king of A tier. Most likely the king of, yes, looking around, it's the king of A tier. This Pokemon is insane. For one, you're not breaking this Pokemon in one hit. You're just never going to break this Pokemon. 165 base attack, 150 defense, and 130 SPDF with 100 HP. You'll never break this Pokemon. This Pokemon now has access to Clear Amulet over the White Herb. Back in the day, people just kind of ran it White Herb, and it dodged the Intimidate one time. Now this Pokemon could just fully dodge the Intimidate. And while, yes, it is Psychic Ice, so like the knockoff is super effective, you have to knock off this Pokemon. And this Pokemon has support like Amoonguss and, annoying things under Trick Room that can essentially redirect the knockoff if you really wanted to. Or, it has high horsepower, which most people run just Glacial Lance and high horsepower together. The ice types are kind of cleaning up everything, like the flying type that's immune to the ground. And then the ground can just take care of like the steel types that wall this up or the fire types that wall this Pokemon up. Terra Water will be a very good Terra, I think, for the upcoming format to deal with like stuff like Kyogre and the Glacial Lances off of this Pokemon. And you can definitely reliably set Trick Room at least twice with this team, with these teams. It's so bulky. And it gets the as one ability, which is just busted. You get two abilities. You get Unnerve, so like things like Citrus Berry Amoonguss, Citrus Berry, or even Wiki Berry, or all those buried Incineroars. Now, a lot of Incineroars probably go safety goggles for this Pokemon because you have the Amoonguss support usually on this team. But just being able to turn off berries is a huge deal. You can't be Yachi Berry for whatever reason if you wanted to Yachi Berry to resist the ice type attack. You just shutting off berries is already huge. But then you also get the Chilling Neigh ability, which once you get the KO onto a Pokemon, it gains an attack boost. And your Clear Amulet, so like you're not intimidating this Pokemon, and you're just boosting it up under Trick Room and sweeping. Probably setting Trick Room a second time because Trick Room is sort of easy to stall out. But paired with Ursaluna or Amoonguss, Incineroar, like this team could be very, very scary, very fast. I just don't think it's A tier or S tier, excuse me. This Pokemon is slow. Anything slow needs Trick Room, and Trick Room is very, I'm not gonna say easy, but it's a good player can just demolish Trick Room, and they could just pick apart Trick Room and stall it out correctly. So I think like this Pokemon is the king of A tier. I do think we'll see one in top 8, maybe 2. We'll definitely see this consistently top 16. Like this is just very good Pokemon. It's something to prep for and to counter for. Up next, we have the Shadow Rider tier. This is our first S tier Pokemon, and it earns a spot. This Pokemon is just absolutely insane. Probably going to be, no, not probably. It will be the premier Pokemon of the format. Once again, we share that as one ability. So no berries, no ghost resist berries, no citrus to recover, no any sort of berry to kind of help out. So like basically if you chip down, you can't, eat the berries. So this, if this thing comes up, let's say you get Incineroar, the calc and you get Incineroar like 40% off, right? And it's citrus. If you just have the right calcs or the right support with the Shadow Rider, you could just clean the Incineroar up. Maybe a priority move in that slot, plus the Astral Barrage will clean it up, or maybe just, Specs plus Helping Hand, or something like that nature. So that makes this Pokemon very good. And then of course it gets the Grim Neigh ability, similar to the Chilling Neigh. Once you get the KO, you're boosting this thing up. Pokemon is Ghost and Psychic, so it's 4 times weak to Dark. It is like the glaring hole in it, but you could Terra now. Terra, you could Terra this thing. It's crazy. You can go Terra Fairy, Draining Kiss to heal it up, and to get a little bit of damage off, you can run Psychic or Psyshock, stab Psychic or Psyshock. So things like Amoonguss, you can just hit those very hard, or you can hit things that have a really good special defense that want to come and wall this. You can just put Psyshock on it and hit on the defensive side, which is going to do a lot of damage. This Pokemon is good with Substitute. This Pokemon has Astral Barrage, which is just 120 base, 100 accurate, spread Ghost move. Not much in the game resists Ghost. And the good combination with this Pokemon is if you pair this Pokemon with like fake out users, you could fake out plus setup, right? It gets nasty plot or it gets sub. So you can fake out, set up this Pokemon. If they Terra Ghost to try to dodge your fake out, you have Astral Barrage, Stab Ghost that just cleans that up. It's a good benefit. Mienshao is a great partner with this Pokemon. And then anything that could stop priority like Fergaref or Indeedee. Indeedee is a really good, that's like the common 3 that were ran in Sword and Shield. You just run Shadow Rider, Indeedee, Mienshao. Mienshao kind of has the wide guard for the mirror. You could feint the wide guards for this Pokemon. And then the Indeedee redirects like Sucker Punch. Well, obviously you have the train for Sucker Punch. But you could redirect hits or even just set this Pokemon up. This is going to be meta defining. Wolf has already won a tournament with it. I'm going to do a video about. This is taking tournaments all around. It's just going to be the premier Pokemon of the format, and the reason it gets the tier name. Next, we have Miraidon. Now, everyone at the start of the format was putting this Pokemon in the S tier to high A. I think, personally, this Pokemon is not S tier. I think it is A tier, but I think it's low A tier. I think it's better than Zamazenta for sure. I think it's better than... It's more consistent than Groudon. I'm going to put it right here. I think it's more consistent. The only reason I think Groudon falls, even though Groudon checks this Pokemon and just, KOs it, the issue is it's easy to bait the Terra on Groudon, and then Draco just, cleans this thing up. And you're needing to run Clear Amulet over AV. And I just don't think that this particular, matchup, you basically lose the consistency off Precipice Blades. I think this could be a little more consistent. Why is this not S tier? Why is this not, the king of the game like we kind of assumed at first? Even though you get that crazy electro drift and electric terrain with the Hadron Engine ability. So basically its ability is Hydron Engine or Hadron Engine. It summons an electric terrain, and then during electric terrain it gets a 1.33 special attack boost. The reason this is kind of not the greatest is because even though you get the 100 base stab electric drift, that also deals 1.3 damage with super effective hits plus the terrain boost plus the ability boost. Yes, this is cool, but Rillaboom is just one of the main culprits of this metagame. So having a non-restricted take your terrain away and just take all the boost away essentially, or half the boost, really hurts this Pokemon. And it also resists Miraidon. So you could play around it. Obviously you can build your team to kind of help with it. You can have certain Pokemon help out, but it's just not going to be the S tier, not going to be the top of the format tier, I think, in my personal opinion, due to that fact. You have to use a restricted, and then a non-restricted Rillaboom just takes your terrain away, rips your terrain away. You have Amoonguss that could redirect. There's a good amount of counterplay to this Pokemon. Also, I think personally, in my hot take maybe, but I don't think it's such a hot take. It's probably a cold take. The Quark Drive Pokemon just aren't as good as the Photosynthesis Pokemon, where the Koraidon is kind of going to take advantage of that. So the partners for this, Bundle's okay, I guess, but Bundle's kind of trash. Hydro Pump can't even kill an Incineroar. It's frail. You have to pretty much EV it, super bulky to kind of support this. I mean, it's all right. Sure, Bundle can hit those ground types, but again, you just kind of bring in Rillaboom and you're chilling. Up next, we have Koraidon. Now, this Pokemon's interesting, and we're kind of putting it down here, lower tiers, but this Pokemon's actually been winning a ton of events, and I actually think this Pokemon is very, very solid. The reason I think it's solid is not only does it summon Sunny Day when it's swapped in, which is very good and resists the Kyogre stuff. It gets Breaking Swipe with a really good 135 attack stat. The speed stat's 135, so it's a speed tie with Miraidon, and it's honestly a neat Pokemon. But mainly because of this last Pokemon that we'll talk about. Being able to have stab fighting to kind of deal with this Pokemon is very nice, and I think with the Breaking Swipe chip, it's a very good support. There are a few issues with that, with the wide guard that's going to be present in the format, as well as Clear Amulet on all these kind of physical Pokemon that want to run it. Even though this is dragon fighting, it's 4 times weak to fairy. I think that Fluttermane falls off just a little bit in this format due to the usage of Galar Shadow and the bulk of these Pokemon. But I still think this is a very insanely good Pokemon. It's getting a lot of results right now as well. I've won a couple. We're going to go over the team review of this Pokemon in the future, and I'll explain why it's doing very good right now. I think this Pokemon will be good for the format. We'll see. We'll do another one of these tier lists later and see if it drops down any, but I think for right now, this is definitely an A tier Pokemon. Last but not least, Terapagos. Now, I personally think this is an S tier Pokemon. This Pokemon is very, very hard to use at times, and especially with like body press stuff or just like stab fighting stuff. But you could like support this so well with the boring, you know, good stuffs, Fire, Water, Grass, and Cinderella or Amoonguss, and then just put this on a balance score. And that's the reason why I think this Pokemon is very good. So you start off basically with actually the base form Terapagos, and it gets Terra Shift. You never really use that. It automatically shifts into the second form of Terapagos, which is the Terrestrial form. So you shift into the Terrestrial form, which is very, very good. It gets the ability Terra Shell. So if its HP is full, the attacks have 0.5 effectiveness unless it's naturally immune. I'm glad they added that in. This is a good check to Calyrex Shadow Rider, so you take resisted damage on any hit, and then you're immune to the Astral Barrage. This Pokemon gets Calm Mind, which is very, very nice. You could set it up. Takes the first hit, it heals it up. You usually run it with Rillaboom and leftovers, so like this Pokemon can just heal up and get the Terra Shell ability back. Start chipping away at opposing Pokemon here and there, and then eventually sweep in the end game if it's boosted up enough, or just be a threat for an end game sweep. Like if you grind through with something like Tornadus Urshifu, right, and they have to grind through that lead, and then you bring this in late game with like a Rillaboom or something, right? Like that could be kind of scary as well, because then like this is hard to break and it's starting to set up and sweep. And also it has a third form, which is the Stellar form. Stellar form gets Terraform 0. It increases its statistics, and it ends the effects of weathers and terrain once per battle. The reason I love this Pokemon, I think it's high skill ceiling with this Pokemon. You can end weathers, like make these Pokemon or terrains. You can put these Pokemon in awkward positions, which is very nice. It's not full like lock like this Pokemon, but there's been so many situations in testing where I've turned off Blizzard to stop like some of the Blizzard spam that you may, you know, come up and fight against with these Pokemon like this, or Veil. I've turned off the Water Spout extra damage and had a partner Pokemon survive. Same with the Sun. I've turned off some of the speed of partner opposing Pokemon, or like Raging Bolt beside Groudon could be interesting sometimes, and turn off the Photosynthesis and hit it with Earth Power that's like boosted at +1 or +2. And it also gets the signature move, which is one of my favorite moves and animations in the game. And it's called Terra Starstorm. Now, Terra Starstorm is a 120 base, 100 accurate move. So it's, again, one of these Pokemon that just gets a 120 base move that spreads, and it's very it's always accurate. So unlike these two that can miss with their signature moves, that seems to be where Pokemon's headed in the future, is just these moves that like essentially don't miss and do 120. So not only do you go up to 160 HP, you have a 130 special attack stat, and then your defenses are all right. You know, 110 and 110 are pretty good actually. But you also gain this move, which it's basically Stellar type, and it hits both foes. And if you Terra, it does super effective, just like the Terra Blast, right? Like it does super effective damage to other Terras. So if you could bait a Terra early in the game with your, you know, like Torn, I've seen a lot of Torn Urshi, Incineroar, and then this Pokemon with like another Pokemon. If you could bait Terra early, this Pokemon becomes a really late game threat. I love this Pokemon because I think, again, it's just very high skill ceiling to use it. But I think this will be an S tier Pokemon that we have to deal with. That's going to be pretty much it. That's going to conclude the tier list. I want to kind of take a minute to, you know, let me know what you think in the comment section. That's why I want to take a minute to kind of look over this and see if you guys disagree with any of these picks, or kind of educate me in the comment section if you do. I do think that this is a decently accurate list, but I think some of these things could be argued and debated, and I would like to know that in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'll see you guys on the next video.